Hello ladies, I'm Lydia from Home Living. If you're new here, there aren't any comments on the YouTube channel, but I would like you to go over to my blog because I'm making these videos for my blog and join in the discussion there. My PayPal contribution button is also there for those of you who have asked, and I'd like to thank all of you who have left comments and contributed and really encouraged me in this. It's quite a daunting thing to know that your words are going to be used long after you're gone, and so you have to, a person has to be very careful. And that being said, today I want to talk about contentment in the home. This is a homemakers blog for support for homemakers, to encourage them and to have somebody talk to them about what it's like staying home and what their purpose is. Of course, everybody does their thing their own way, but these are some of my ideas. And if you have something to do, don't just sit here and watch me. There's nothing to watch. I'm not doing any fancy camera work. I'm not showing you around my home. I'm not putting words on here. It's just a voice. So the purpose of this video and the others is so that you can set me down somewhere and make a bed, clean a bathtub, if you can hear me while you're running water, load up your dishwasher, fold some clothes. You can even go out and hang some on the line. You can tidy up something, sort through a box of papers, clean out a drawer, that sort of thing. And hopefully this will give you time to do maybe one room, part of the kitchen, and some laundry, I hope. So please use it as a background noise for whatever you're trying to do. But before I launch into what I'm going to talk about today, which is contentment at home, I'm going to read you something from what I had talked about last time, a man named Alexis de Tocqueville. So I have to read this, and I don't like doing that. I don't really have a script, ladies. I have to memorize everything in my head, and the way I do that is I'll say something, and the last part of it will trigger off what the next thing is I'm going to say. And that's the way I do it. I'm not very good with notes, and I don't have a script. And so, but this one I do have to read because I talked about Alexis de Tocqueville, who we studied him in homeschooling. And although he wrote in the 1800s in a way that, well, I'm not sure it was the 1800s, but he wrote about visiting America in the pioneer days, and what it was like in the homes, what the women were like, what the children were like, what the men were like. And I did explain how he viewed the women, and we talked about how they had needlework and fancy threads, and they would sit by their hearth at night doing this tapestry that had no relation at all to the rough surroundings that they were in. But it's interesting, something else he says here, and we'll go into it later on. So I want to just read this observation as he was invited into a cabin. We called them cabins here. They were log houses, and I don't know, we might call them shacks somewhere else. So here I go. I'm going to read something from Alexis de Tocqueville. And he had wrote a number of books, and one of them was America Revisited, which has a lot of these things in it that I read and that I refer to. So I'm going to talk about contentment in the home. And here is a scene that he describes that shows contentment, and it will fascinate you, maybe create some kind of conversation in you. So please leave a comment about it, please. I enjoy that so much. Okay, by the side of the hearth, now see these little things that I have to use, these little arrows are so tiny. By the side of the hearth sits a woman. See, he's approached this cabin and he's been invited in, and so he describes it. By the side of the hearth sits a woman with a baby on her lap. She nods to us without disturbing herself. Like the pioneer, and he's talking about, he had described the husband before, you know, this rugged man. So he said, like the pioneer, this woman is in the prime of her life. Her appearance would seem superior to her condition. Now this is something that describes the way it was on the homestead. many people that came up there to Homestead were actually quite educated, quite sophisticated. They wore nice clothes. They didn't throw away their refinement. They had teacups. They drank out of teacups. They would dress up for church in a nice outfit, and they did not throw away their refinement because of the crude surroundings of the forest and the rough houses. Often the houses had beautiful braided rugs and pretty curtains and comfortable furniture in them. And so I like this. It said that her appearance was greater than the surroundings. And her apparel, that's clothing, even betrays a lingering taste for dress. But her delicate limbs and her features are mild, and her melancholy, and her whole physiognomy bears marks of a degree of religious resignation, a deep quiet of all passions. I suppose that would be what we call contentment. But listen for what he's coming to. And some sort of natural and tranquil firmness, ready to meet all the ills of life without fearing and without braving them. Now, I suppose that means that she wouldn't have to summon up any courage of bravery because she was ready to meet the challenges. This is the way they were. And her children cluster about her, full of health, turbulence, and energy, and they are true children of that wilderness. Their mother watches them from time to time with mingled melancholy and joy. To look at their strength and her languor, one might imagine that the life she has given them has exhausted her own, and still she regrets not what they have cost her. Now look, this is such an interesting way to describe things. Life beats us all up, especially in the home. Life is not very predictable, and we in the home make some things predictable. Our family knows that we're going to be tidy, and we're going to have a meal at a certain time, and that we want a pretty house, and we make life tolerable for those who are coming in from a turbulent world. So they had this sense. Somehow I think society lost it between the pioneer times and today, because this description is what I remember about the women growing up on the homesteads. The house inhabited by these immigrants, he called everybody that came out from the east to the west immigrants. The house inhabited by these immigrants has no internal partition or loft. In other words, it's not divided into rooms like ours are. In the one chamber of which it consists, the whole family is gathered for the night. The dwelling is itself a little world, an ark of civilization amidst an ocean of foliage. May I break off here for a minute to tell you about the ark? My children and I got left a lot out on a farm because my husband had to go away for work, and ministry took him a long ways away. So what we did is I decided, since I was homeschooling, of course, I had the freedom of creativity. So we pretended one day during a terrible rainstorm, and I don't know, those of you who have been to Texas know what the thunder and lightning is like. It'll shake the house. We pretended we were on the ark. All the doors shut and all the windows shut, and how we talked about how do we think that those people would have gotten along with each other on the ark for such a long time. And we had such a sense of discovery with this. So here he calls this an ark of civilization. And by the way, when there was a storm and when we were pretending we were on the ark and discussing this, we went out on deck and enjoyed the lightning and enjoyed, we had something to eat, a little snack, and just created a memory. An ark of civilization amidst an ocean of foliage. 100 steps beyond it, the primeval forest spreads its shades. And so I just wanted to read that to you because I think that this picture of contentment. Now, I couldn't find the part. It takes a long time to get through the chapters and read that book, but there was a part that I read years ago where Alexis de Tocqueville said, that the women often would have hired, the men and the women, the farmer or the forester would have hired help, and it would be somebody else in the area. And the women hired help too. And he said he was astonished at these women living in these rough surroundings, wearing clothing that were left over from a finer time in their life, and they had hired help. They had hired help and hired housekeepers to come and hire to help them. And yet, these people that they hired were equal to them. They helped each other out. And someone needs a job, well, hire them. And someone needs help, well, hire someone. And it didn't mean that anyone was superior. He compared it to royalty, in which he said they live like royalty without having royal conceit or anything like that, which I don't know exactly what all that entails. But this brings me to this idea of contentment in the home. Is you're going to have some refinement and something that feels royal. And if you're the servant, first there's two roles. There's the servant of the home, which would be you, and then there's the lady of the house who comes in and needs to have a respectable place to live and needs to be treated with dignity. So when you're cleaning, remember you're cleaning for that lady that's going to come in and want a clean sink and want to have her clothes hung up and everything. So you need to treat yourself as someone who's created in the image of God and has a soul. And when you do that, when you think of yourself with a refined and dignified attitude, things change. Things change in the home. So if you're having trouble keeping up, now I can understand if you've just had a baby, or, you know, my excuse was always, I just had a baby 40 years ago, because I never did feel like I have caught up. I still have boxes I need to go through from that era. Anyway, it's like the other day when I did a video, I suggested that you walk through the house after you've cleaned it and enter it again as though you have come home, and that the servant has done all the work, and you're so happy because the tea is laid out, and there's clean towels in the bathroom, and the kitchen looks nice and smells nice, and there's a nice stew cooking in the slow cooker, and you've got everything ready for her. So the other thing is, if you're the lady of the house, you need to dress for this regal job and treat yourself like, the Bible, the New Testament tells people who have obeyed the gospel that they are a royal priesthood. And so I was intrigued by that word royal, and it entails good manners and appropriateness and living above things that are crude and rude. Now, let's take, for example, royalty. First of all, when they go out, I don't know if you want to look at European royalty and kind of observe when they've gone out to a charity event or when they're shaking hands with people, they don't dress down to identify with everybody else. They dress up and they raise the standard. They raise the bar. They make us admire how they dress, and they stand differently, and they have a proper posture and everything like that. But who would go out to meet and shake hands with somebody that really looked like that lacked that dignity in their appearance? So I would really encourage homemakers, you've got to be the best dressed people in your society. You really do. Now, I don't mean wear things that you would wear to a formal ball, but I have encouraged people to use cottons, like what I show on my blog, and you can make very pretty clothing, or you can find them, but you have got to look like you're dressed well. And you have children too. They will observe that, and they will learn about their appearance from your example. So why do we like the historical movies? Why do you think we just watch those things over and over and listen to what Elizabeth says to Mr. Darcy, and watch her taking that long walk on that country road, and her face is all red with cold wind. And why do we admire that so much? Because, ladies, when they went for walks, and it's described in other books besides Jane Austen books, they weren't trying to keep fit. Like when you see someone go for a walk today, especially if it's a young person, the message that you get by the way they're dressed and the way that they are moving is that they're trying to keep fit. And that's okay. That's nice. They want to do that. But you know what's really more comforting and enchanting and interesting and delightful is a woman who dresses up for a long walk because she wants to enjoy the leaves falling from an autumn tree, or she's looking around and she's breathing the fresh air, and she's thinking about when she finishes this walk, what she's going to go in and have in her house and have a cup of hot tea. And so there's a big difference. So I'd like to challenge you, if you're having trouble with isolation, anxiety, and things like that, to dress up. Start out by dressing up and give yourself some dignity and behave like royalty. And that doesn't mean that you're think you are above anybody. It just means that you have dignity. So let's discuss royalty for a minute. They have rules. You know, they can't wear things that aren't appropriate, and so aren't appropriate for the situation. And so we're so used to seeing people when they go for walks look awful that we think. And also, I did go for a walk for a while with some ladies that wanted to walk, and it was the most depressing thing, because of course they had to walk at a certain pace. You had to wear sports clothes, yes, of course, but they're not very pretty. And never once did any of them notice, oh, the leaves are changing. Oh, look at there in the distance. Oh, isn't this nice? Isn't this pretty? So when I took my children on nature walks, and being homeschooling, you can be more creative. I took them on nature walks. I taught them what to see. I taught them to look at the clouds in the sky. I taught them to look at the things that were growing. I taught them to smell the air. I taught them to understand the temperature, to understand weather, to understand the creation. There's so much. I mean, I probably could spend a whole hour talking about that. And they dressed up in something that would give them a memory. You know, we liked thinking of history and of the past. We always liked history. But why do we like history, and why do we like those historical films? Partly because of the costumes, partly because of these refined activities. Who do you see going for a walk anymore? A real walk dressed up like in outdoor clothes that aren't jogging outfits, really. And I'm not saying you can't do that, but look, if you're having trouble with feeling isolated and also with a lingering feeling of life being rather unhappy for you, and then I would suggest you change how you dress, because that's something you can control. You can't control the weather. You can't control the atmosphere. You can't control politics. You can't control anybody else, but you can control how you dress and change things an awful lot for yourself when you're out and when you're in the home. And you know, you can change things for others too, because they can be blessed by what you look like. So you can use it as a ministry. So I'm using a few notes here, which I'm happy with. I don't want to read my notes. I want it all in my head. So to cure this problem of, I wish I lived in another time. I was born after my time. I wasn't born in the right era. What I would do, and this is what I've always done, is I create that era. I pick things that I liked, that my mother liked, and that my grandmother liked, and I incorporate them in my home. Whether they are habits, whether they are things like an old sink that I like, or an old or a lamp, or the shape of something, or clothing. I bring those all in, and plus their habits. You know, they had. Do you ever wondered what that day of the week was with the towels? Remember, Monday was wash day. Tuesday was baking day. Wednesday was shopping day. Thursday was laundry. And Friday was, goodness, I don't know what all the rest, but there was church on Sunday, and there was. So here's the problem. They didn't all do the same thing on the same day, but they would embroider those towels the way they wanted them, so that they got those fresh towel out every day in the kitchen. They didn't use the same towel day after day. They wash it, so they bring a fresh one out, and it was embroidered, and it had the day of the week on it, and it told what they did that day. You don't really understand this until you start making a list for a day, and you find out you're doing everything that day. You might write down, I need to answer a letter, I need to do the laundry, I need to go and work in the garden, I need to go shopping, and so every day, these women in the home, because we have so much freedom, we can go when we want to, run all day, and we're just as exhausted as if we were working out in the corporate world. So I would suggest, here's what my mother-in-law did. I always observed this. Now, her husband was a preacher, so Sunday was a pretty hectic day for her. So on Monday, she put in the laundry all the clothes that they'd worn on Sunday, and other clothes, and she did the laundry on Monday, which to me, I think I should do it on Saturday, so I have clean stuff for Sunday. But that's what she did. And while she was waiting for the washer to quit so she could take stuff out to the line, she finished her correspondence. She wrote to her sister, she wrote to her mother, she wrote to her friends, and spent that quiet time at the table, the kitchen table, waiting for that laundry. And those were the two things she did that day. She would bring them in and fold them and put them away, and then Tuesday she would do something else besides the normal things like the meals and taking care of the house. But she did not sweep every day, and she had a day for everything that she did. And that's what I suggest is we go back to that. I think we've lost something there when we have so many machines. We can just turn them on and just get the vacuum cleaner out and turn it on. But of course, ladies, vacuums don't run themselves. And they're not your servant, because if they really were your servant, you could touch it and it would go do what you told it to. So I wish I had lived in another time. You can create the time you want to live in. You don't really want to live in that time. You want to have some of the stuff and some of the habits of that time, and you can do that. So I would suggest that you treat yourself as a guest. So a guest, if you had a guest, you wouldn't want them coming into a disorganized, dirty home. So as a servant, you'd want to get that cleaned up before the guest arrived. And so you just have to treat yourself as a guest and as royalty. So I just wanted to say that if you want things to change, and if you are having trouble with feeling isolated and anxiety, and of course it's not just the homemaker that feels this, it could be anybody, keep a little journal and do several things with this little journal. I know there's these journals where you can also draw in, paint in, and keep a daily record of what you've done. And keep a little journal and kind of take note of the times when that anxiety hits you, and find out what you were doing at the time before, and then the next day plan. If it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, if you tend to have an unsettled feeling at 10 o'clock in the morning and you want a sense of well-being, then the next day plan to do something else at that time and see if it makes a difference. The other thing is that I have noticed, when the house is not, I'm very uneasy when the house isn't neat and tidy, or if there's a big mess somewhere that I just can't seem to get at. That does create a lot of anxiety. You would be surprised how different it is when you can get it more organized. And so you do it for yourself. Do it because you're royalty, and do it because that thing, my computer is going out, and I'm anxious to get my things off of it onto another computer before it completely goes. So, identify the problem that you're having that stands in the way of having a sense of well-being and contentment. And then list some steps to fix it. Now remember, complaining, criticizing, and condemning don't fix anything. Blaming and punishing yourself or others doesn't teach anything, doesn't fix anything. But really successful people will fix something, get things done. So I have described the reason for the days of the week towels. I have suggested how to dress your best. And I want to leave you with 2 more things. Every day, observe some small thing and appreciate it and be grateful for it. Like today, I was just walking along a gravel parking lot, and I noticed some teeny tiny pink flowers growing up through the gravel. Have you ever noticed some of the nicest flowers prefer the side of the road and the gravel? It's because it has minerals. You can't get a bluebonnet to grow in your fine garden. It wants to grow somewhere else where it's neglected. Observe some little thing. And the other thing is do something that is a sweet and kind luxury that's simple for yourself every day to reinforce the fact that you are created in the image of God with a soul and that you have dignity, and to give yourself dignity. I am not suggesting, of course, that you think about just your own needs all the time. I want to make that clear because, of course, I'm going to get all those comments, you know. So you can give yourself small luxuries with little cost, just some effort. So do those 2 things every day. Observe and keep a journal and observe something every day that's small and that you can be grateful for. And do something for yourself every day that is a small luxury. So until I come back with another video, I hope this has helped you, and I hope you got some things done while you were listening. So I just want to thank you all of you who have prayed for me and who leave comments. Please leave a comment, and see you next time. Bye.